flags at half-mast, a casket draped in the American flag, and a 21-gun salute. Few events in U.S. history evoke a nation's deep respect, unity, and reflection as powerfully as a presidential state funeral. When a leader has profoundly shaped the course of a nation, it marks not just the end of an era, but a moment to honor their enduring legacy. The history of state funerals in the United States dates back to the death of Founding Father Benjamin Franklin on April 17, 1790. His funeral, held 4 days later, included a procession that stopped at the Pennsylvania State House, now known as Independence Hall, before continuing to the Christ Church burial ground where Franklin was laid to rest. For the first time in U.S. history, Congress declared an official mourning period of 1 month. Coincidentally, the first presidential funeral in U.S. history was for George Washington, the nation's first president. He passed away on December 14, 1799, at his home, Mount Vernon. Following his death, mock funerals were held across the country, with the largest one taking place in Philadelphia on December 26th. During this procession, 16 cannons were fired and an empty casket was carried in a grand symbolic display. Washington's actual funeral, however, was held privately on December 18th in accordance with his wishes. It was a simple, intimate ceremony. Today, state funerals are shaped by strict protocol and long-standing traditions, though the family of a deceased president has the option to make adjustments to the procession. A notable example of this was Richard Nixon, who passed away in 1994. His family chose to forgo a state funeral in favor of a more simple service at his presidential library. Presidential state funerals typically span 5 days, with planning beginning early in each president's term. This allows the president to incorporate personal touches that reflect their character and help shape their legacy. In many ways, the funeral serves as a final conversation with the nation. That said, there are several key elements that make up a state funeral. After a death is announced, the first act of a state funeral begins when the current president issues a presidential proclamation, which allows all flags of the United States to be lowered to half-mast. This usually happens immediately and applies to all U.S. flags flying at government buildings, offices, public schools, and military bases. Protocol also provides that the flags will fly at half-mast for 30 days. Next, the sitting president issues an executive order for a national day of mourning, which corresponds with the funeral day. This allows the closure of all federal departments. The day after the death announcement, the commanders of army installations with the necessary personnel and material order that 1 gunshot be fired every half hour. This begins at réveil and ends at retreat. Réveil is a French word which translates to wake up. That means that gunshots will be fired from sunrise to sunset. From the time of the death announcement until the day of the state funeral, the commanding general of the Joint Force Headquarters National Capital Region will act as a military escort for the president's family. On the day of the funeral at noon, all previously mentioned military installations will fire a 21-gun salute. Additionally, a 50-gun salute will be fired, with each shot representing one of the 50 U.S. states. Next, the lying-in-state ceremony takes place. There are differences in the arrangements depending on whether the deceased is a sitting or former president. A sitting president typically lies in repose in the East Room of the White House, while former presidents do so in their home state, state of adoption, or presidential library. Afterwards, the bodies of former presidents are transported to Washington, D.C. The funeral procession begins near the White House, typically starting on either Pennsylvania or Constitution Avenue, and proceeds towards the United States Capitol. The casket, draped in the US flag, is placed on a four-wheel caisson drawn by 6 horses of the same color. Accompanying the caisson are 8 body bearers, marching alongside. The procession consists of 3 march units, proceeding at a pace of 3 miles per hour, each led by a military band. Directly in front of the caisson, 3 color guards can be seen, with the center guard responsible for carrying the US flag. Behind the caisson, another color guard bears the US presidential flag. Following this, a single honor guard leads a riderless horse. The horse, equipped with a sword and boots placed in reverse in the stirrups, symbolizes a fallen warrior who will never ride again. The presidential family follows the procession in a motorcade. Midway between the White House and the Capitol, there are flyovers by 21 aircrafts from the United States Air Force. The flyover consists of 5 flights, with the 3rd aircraft in the final formation performing the missing man maneuver, a tradition often used to honor fallen pilots. The procession traditionally ends at the center steps of the east front of the Capitol, though variations may occur based on the wishes of the former president or their family. Once at the Capitol, the casket is placed on the Lincoln catafalque in the rotunda, where members of Congress gather to pay their respects. Following this, the public is allowed to pay tribute during the lying in state, which typically lasts for 24 hours before the ceremony continues. The next step is the religious service, usually held at the Washington National Cathedral. However, the location may vary depending on the deceased president's religious beliefs. The service is attended by the immediate family, government officials, former presidents, and royals or dignitaries from foreign countries. The duration of the service may vary depending on the number of eulogies delivered. After the religious service, the deceased president is transported to their final resting place. Traditionally, this was done by a funeral train, allowing mourners across the country to pay their respects. In modern times, the casket is more commonly flown to its final destination. The final step is the actual funeral service, which follows the format of a military funeral, as former presidents are granted full military honors. A 3-volley salute is fired over the graveside, followed by a bugle call. The United States Marine Band then performs the final salute with the playing of Eternal Father, Strong to Save. During the interment, the United States Air Force conducts a final flyover, again performing the missing man formation. The service concludes with the folding of the flag that draped the casket. 8 honor guards fold the flag 12 times, and it is then presented to the next of kin, typically the spouse or the closest living relative, with the guard kneeling in front of them.